Hello and welcome to Unit 1 in our New Mexico history class. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what we'll be doing during this unit. You can see the list of assignments and the objectives for the unit in the section of Blackboard, or I should say of the learning module, just before this video. So this unit is all about getting to know each other, getting to know the course, learning to navigate our course in Blackboard, and also getting to know the field of history and how we study the past. So that's going to be the focus of a lot of our thinking. The first chapter in the New Mexico History Digital Text focuses on how historians think about the past, not just where they look for evidence and information about past events, but also how they interpret that information and the ways that they've tried to add multiple perspectives to our understanding of the past. As you may well know, or at least be somewhat familiar with, the field of history has long been focused on the study of written records. That's been changing, though, within the past probably 30, 40 years or so, as historians have realized that there were a lot of oppressed and marginalized people who did not leave behind written records. Or if they did leave behind written records, those were mediated by those who had more power in their society. So we can think of the Nahuatl people living in what is today Mexico City, who learned to write in European script. They learned to write their language in European script, but of course they often had priests, Franciscans or Dominicans, looking over their shoulders as they recorded their own histories. That would have shaped the kinds of stories that they were able to tell. And so that's just one example of thinking about how history is created, why people create what we call primary sources. One of the main things to take away from this first unit is the distinction between primary sources and secondary sources. As you'll read, and in general, primary sources are those that were created at the time of the event that we're studying, whereas secondary sources were created after the fact, usually by scholars, historians who are trying to put together the puzzle of what happened in the past. So they're taking various primary sources, they're also looking at other secondary sources to add something new to our understanding of a certain event. The Pueblo Revolt that we'll study in Unit 2 is one of those events that historians have long debated. They've kind of disagreed about the meaning of certain aspects of that event. They've also been able to read between the lines and look for the testimonies and accounts of Pueblo people who survived through the revolt, who were still around after the Reconquest, which, although it's remembered as having been bloodless, wasn't. So those are things we'll be looking at over the next couple of units. And in order to critically evaluate those past events and think about what's the best way of understanding those, what's the most complete and fullest way of understanding those things, we have to use historical thinking skills. And so that's another big element of what we're doing here in Unit 1. We're thinking about the kinds of questions, the modes of inquiry, the methods that historians use to understand the past. We won't go into too much depth with that, but we will kind of address things like the 5 C's of historical thinking, which of course that's not like a hard and fast rule, that's some magic formula that there are 5 C's of historical thinking, but it's a way of a framework and a way of thinking about our study of history. So pay attention to what those 5 C's are. You'll also see other approaches in the videos that we'll look at about like 7 different ways of thinking about historical thinking. Both of them will help us be better analysts of the past. And I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas about what history is, how you've come to history, and how we should study the past. I think those are the main things that we'll be talking about. We will be working with Twitter and Tiki-Taki. Mostly, well, there are 2 purposes. Mostly so that I can help ensure that all of us get started on those platforms, and if you need help, you can contact me and I will be there for support. Also, they're great places to talk about historical thinking, to share primary and secondary sources, And then with Tiki-Taki, we're going to place ourselves on our course timeline. And it'll be interesting to see how it comes together in such a way that many of us will become part of that flow of the timeline. We'll see where our lives kind of relate to the different events that we're studying, and see certain things that seem distant in the past actually weren't so distant. So that will take place over the course of the whole 2-week intersession that will kind of evaluate those things. So as always, and as I want to keep reiterating, please let me know whenever you have questions. I understand that many of us don't have experience with online classes, and many of us don't have experience with things like Twitter or Tiki-Taki. I've tried to give detailed tutorials and instructions via the syllabus, but also in the timeline tab and in the reading tweets tab. But again, if you need help, please reach out, let me know, and I'll be happy to help. All right, I think that's it.